Anyone who applies pesticide must have an understanding of pesticide labeling. This module will help you understand what is required for a pesticide label to be approved and a product registered. It will also give you important information on how pesticides are named, how ingredients are defined, and types of formulations. Safety portions of the label that address personal and environmental safety will be reviewed. Lastly, I'll cover an overview of some portions of the Directions for Use section of a label. It's a federal and state requirement that pesticide users read and follow all label directions. That includes not only the label itself, but any additional brochures or leaflets referenced on the label or received from the manufacturer. The label and all its pieces provides instructions to protect human health and the environment and achieve effective pest management. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, is the federal agency responsible for the registration of all pesticide products. EPA determines if there is sufficient data to register the product and then reviews all of the data required for registration. EPA may require manufacturers make changes to a label. Before the product can enter the channels of trade, EPA must approve the label and register the product. Before a pesticide product is registered by EPA, a significant amount of data must be collected and analyzed by the company interested in registering the pesticide. Chemical companies may screen thousands of compounds in the laboratory to find a single promising active ingredient. The active ingredient must then be tested in the laboratory, field, and sometimes in the greenhouse. A wide range of studies are conducted during the testing phase. The company spends many years and invests millions of dollars to complete this phase. It's only after the data is submitted to EPA for review and the label is approved that the pesticide product can be sold. The extensive testing required prior to pesticide product registration includes many different types to understand the hazards. This is one of the reasons that pesticides, especially new pesticides, are so costly. Manufacturers have to conduct toxicity, efficacy, degradation, and environmental fate studies in order to submit a total data package to EPA for review. Let's look at a couple of these studies. Toxicity or toxicological tests are conducted in a laboratory setting. Generally, laboratory animals, such as rats and rabbits, are exposed to the pesticide to determine what amount causes everything from ill effects to death. Efficacy tests are conducted to determine how well the pesticide manages the target pest under laboratory, field, and possibly greenhouse conditions. EPA only reviews efficacy data for antimicrobials and termiticides. The rate and timing of application is identified during these trials. Plant damage can sometimes result from insecticide and fungicide applications, particularly with emulsifiable concentrates under slow drying conditions. The pesticide must be evaluated for its ability to cause plant damage. Labels use the term phytotoxicity to mean plant injury or damage. Whether it's DDT remaining in fat cells of animals or pesticides getting into drinking water, environmental impacts must be measured prior to pesticide registration. Manufacturers must know what happens to a pesticide after it's applied. Does it degrade quickly or slowly? Does it move with water easily? Does it change into a gas phase or vapor? Special tests are required to assess the potential to move with water into groundwater. Another concern is how well it can move into plants from soils. Pesticides that are registered for use on food or feed crops or to animals have specific label requirements regarding how to make sure that harvested crops meet the residue tolerances set by EPA. One of the most important protections of our food supply is the pre-harvest or pre-harvest slaughter interval. With these studies, the manufacturer knows how long it takes the residue to degrade to a level of no concern. EPA bases the residue tolerance on the level at which there is no observable effect from the pesticide, plus they factor in additional margins of safety. Pesticide products for food crops typically have a pre-harvest interval, or PHI, identified on the label. The pre-harvest interval is the minimum number of days allowed between the last application and harvest. By following label rate and pre-harvest interval directions, the grower is assured that the residue tolerance will not be exceeded. Applying at higher rates or not waiting until the PHI has expired leads to illegal residues on food that has questionable safety. The environmental impacts that could result from application of a pesticide must be determined prior to product registration. How does the pesticide affect bees, birds, fish, and other wildlife? Does the pesticide move readily with water and have the potential to enter surface or groundwater? In the previous module on pesticide laws, we discussed the different types of pesticide registrations. Again, most pesticide products are registered as a Section 3 or standard registration. Pesticides that are deemed to pose minimal risks to human health and the environment may qualify for exemption from registration under Section 25B of FIFRA. Section 24C, or Special Local Needs registrations, are used when additional uses need to be added to the label of a registered product. An emergency exemption, or Section 18, may be requested by a state if they have a serious pest problem for which there is no federally registered pesticide product. It's important to read the entire label before buying a pesticide. Make certain that it's labeled for the crop or site where you intend to make the application and that you have the necessary application equipment. Read the label before storing the pesticide, in case there are special storage considerations. Read the label before mixing and applying the pesticide, so you know the correct rates, timing of application, and proper personal protective equipment required. And read the label before disposing of unused pesticide in empty containers, because the label often outlines disposal requirements and options, including recycling of triple-rinsed containers. Pesticides can be referred to by several different names. Each pesticide product has a trade name, also called a brand or product name. The trade name appears in the first part of the label, usually in large letters. This example shows the trade name is PlantGuard 50W. The 50W indicates that the formulated product is a wettable powder with 50% active ingredient. The product name usually must be recorded on application records, so make sure you record the full product name as PlantGuard 50W. There may be some other products with similar but different names, like PlantGuard 70WDG or PlantGuard 4EC. The ingredient statement appears below the product name on the label. The active ingredients in a pesticide product are the chemicals that have activity against the target pest. Federal law requires the active ingredient be listed and the percentage of active ingredient is quantified. If there are more than a single active ingredient, each one must be listed. In the example shown here, the product name is 7 and the active ingredient is carbaryl or 1-naphthyl N-methylcarbamate. The product contains 20% carbaryl by weight. The percentage of inert ingredients must also be quantified in the ingredient statement. However, the chemicals that comprise the inert ingredients don't need to be named unless there are hazards associated with them. Pesticide products must list the actual chemical name of the active ingredient in the ingredient statement. In this example, tetrachloroisothialnitrile is the chemical name of the active ingredient in Turf Care turf and ornamental fungicide. Because the actual chemical names are very difficult to pronounce and remember, EPA allows manufacturers to use common names of the active ingredient. The EPA accepted common name is not required, but most labels have them listed since they are much easier to say. There is only one accepted common name for each chemical name. In this example, chlorothalonil is the common name for tetrachloroisothialnitrile. A few examples of other common names that you may be familiar with are carbaryl, glyphosate, and 2,4-D. It's a good idea to purchase pesticides according to their common names to make certain you're buying the active ingredient that will be effective against the pest you want to manage. Of course, the product label must list the crop or site where you intend to make the application. As mentioned in the Federal Law module, pesticide products are classified by EPA as restricted use products or as general or unclassified use. Restricted use pesticides can only be purchased and used by certified applicators or persons under their direct supervision. If a pesticide is classified as EPA restricted use, the restricted use pesticide statement always appears prominently on the front panel of the product label. There are different reasons for pesticides to be classified as restricted use by EPA. The pesticide may pose potential to harm humans, non-target organisms, or the environment. To use these products, pesticide applicators must have demonstrated a minimal level of competency and become certified or licensed to purchase and apply them or supervise their use. General or unclassified use pesticides usually have a lower toxicity or pose little harm to the environment. Anyone can purchase and apply these products. Pesticide is an umbrella term that includes all the different types of pesticides. One group of pesticides are the insecticides that manage insects. Herbicides, control of weeds. Disinfectants, kill germs. I want to drive home the point that pesticides includes all the different types. Herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, disinfectants, and the list goes on. People often equate pesticides as insecticides only and don't recognize that pesticides include all the other products that control other non-insect pests. People often say they use pesticides and herbicides, but that is like saying they own dogs and Labrador retrievers. An herbicide is a pesticide and a Labrador retriever is a dog. A label typically lists the type of pesticide and has statements near the product name that indicates what the product controls. Each product lists the net contents, which is the total amount of product in a container. Liquids net contents are expressed as gallons, quarts, pints, or ounces, and dry materials are listed in pounds or dry weight ounces. The total amount of active ingredient in a dry formulation can be determined by multiplying the net contents of product by the percent of active ingredient. For liquid formulations, the label states how many pounds of active ingredient are in a gallon of product. So you simply multiply the net contents by the active ingredient pound per gallon rate to calculate how much active ingredient is in the container. Let's work through two examples. For the dry formulation, use the percent active ingredient. If we had 10 pounds of Lexone DF and it contains 25%, we multiply 10 pounds times 25% and get 2.5 pounds of active ingredient. With a liquid formulation, the Lexone 2E product, the label states there are 2 pounds of active ingredient per gallon. So, if we take a 2.5 gallon container and multiply by 2 pounds per gallon, you get 5 pounds of active ingredient. If you ever take mixed products that have similar active ingredients, you need to do this type of calculation. Back to the label and its parts. All pesticide products registered by EPA have a unique EPA registration number. Don't confuse the registration number with the EPA establishment number. The establishment number identifies the manufacturing plant where the product was produced. The manufacturer name and address also must be included on the label. Application record keeping may require the EPA registration number. Signal words appear on all pesticide labels. The signal word on a product label indicates its acute toxicity to humans and animals. It's the wake up and pay attention hazard statement. Almost all professionally used pesticides have signal words. Only those products with very low toxicities are exempt from requiring signal words on labels. All labels also include the statement, "Keep out of reach of children." There are 4 different signal words: danger poison, danger alone, warning, and caution. The signal word danger, poison, peligro, with the skull and crossbones indicates that the product is highly toxic by any route of entry into the body and toxic at very low doses. The danger poison signal word indicates that this product can kill you when you've been exposed to low doses. Note the skull and crossbones. Several insecticides, fumigants, and rodenticides carry the danger poison peligro signal words. You can see the danger poison signal word is listed in red with the skull and crossbones, and the signal word appears in a prominent place on the label so the user can quickly assess the relative acute toxicity of the product. Note the product is also restricted use. The danger signal word indicates an acute effect at low doses. However, these products won't kill you, but they are extremely damaging physically at low doses. Whereas danger poison means deadly, the signal word danger alone lets the user know that severe injury, like irreversible eye damage or severe burns, can occur when exposed to low doses. Several herbicides carry this signal word. Make certain to read the precautionary statements when a pesticide product has the danger peligro signal word. The precautionary statements provide additional information to the user about the hazards of the pesticide, such as severe eye damage or skin irritation. The other 2 signal words are warning and caution. Warning, aviso, indicates that the pesticide product is moderately toxic by any route or that it can cause moderate eye or skin irritation. The caution signal word is for products of low toxicity. The warning signal word is shown in the first part of the pesticide product label along with the statement, "Keep out of reach of children." Sections on the label entitled First Aid or a statement of practical treatment give the user additional information on first aid procedures to perform if an exposure occurs. The signal word caution may have the Spanish word precaución. Caution indicates low toxicity products. When choosing a pesticide product, there may be several choices that effectively manage the target pest. It's a good idea to choose a chemical with a lower toxicity if it provides the desired level of control. Choosing lower toxicity materials reduces your risks. In addition to the signal words, the precautionary statements provide important information to protect the pesticide user. These are especially important with warning labeled products since the concern is not evident by the signal word alone. Precautionary statements indicate potential acute effects from exposure, like may be fatal if swallowed or inhaled. They may provide precautions to reduce your risks, like avoid contact with skin or clothing, so cover up. In addition, the precautionary statements often list specific personal protective equipment for reducing exposures. Always read precautionary statements prior to mixing, loading, or applying a pesticide. The hazards to humans and domestic animals and the steps to minimize exposure are outlined. This label section includes the required personal protective equipment, or PPE, that is required when mixing and loading, or those required for applying the pesticide. In this example, mixers and loaders must wear a long-sleeve shirt and long pants or coveralls, worn over long-sleeve shirt and short or long pants, chemical-resistant gloves, shoes plus socks, protective eyewear, and a chemical-resistant apron. Note that applicators don't require the same level of protection since the product has already been diluted in the tank. Read specific action statements carefully. Many products have more than one hazard. The specific action statement identifies the hazard and the action to minimize the potential hazard. For example, this product causes irreversible eye damage, identifies the hazard. The user must wear goggles or face shield when handling, states the protective action to take. This example lists several other hazards and protective actions. I want to emphasize how important this section is for assisting the applicator in understanding the specific hazard a product poses. It's required that the user wear all personal protective clothing and equipment listed on the pesticide label. Mixing and loading requires the greatest level of protection and the most PPE since you're exposed to the most highly concentrated form of the pesticides. As noted a minute ago, people who make applications may not be required to wear the same level of PPE as the mixer loader. If a label does not specify the personal protective equipment to be worn, at a minimum, wear a long-sleeve shirt, long pants, shoes and socks, and chemical-resistant gloves to reduce your exposures. Pesticide labels may outline other precautions, such as this example that notes possible allergic reactions might occur following prolonged or repeated skin contact. These precautions may include common sense considerations when using any pesticide, such as remove and wash contaminated clothing. The Statement of Practical Treatment section on the label describes the first aid treatments to perform if an exposure incident occurs. Specific first aid treatments are given based on what part of the body was exposed. They typically list the normal routes of exposure: eyes, oral, inhalation, and skin. When a person has been exposed and there's a concern due to the exposure, give emergency first aid treatment immediately. Take the victim to a doctor. Take the pesticide label also. It's a good idea to have a prepared copy of the labels you work with and a notebook in case an accident occurs. Labels have very important information that the physician needs to treat the exposed person. It may list specific medical treatments, including antidotes. The next section on the label addresses environmental concerns. Pesticide products may pose certain hazards to bees, birds, invertebrates, wildlife, or water. The environmental hazard statements specify the hazard a product poses to animals, like aquatic organisms, bees, waterfowl, other birds, and the list goes on. Read this section of the label to assess any concerns that may occur from applying a product. Always use extreme care to protect the environment when applying pesticides. Almost every label lists basic precautions about protecting water sources. Other labels may have very specific concerns. Some pesticides have physical or chemical concerns. If a product is flammable or corrosive, the label identifies the hazards and how to prevent a hazardous situation. Make sure you read the label completely prior to purchase and application so you're knowledgeable about all the hazards associated with the product. The hazard statements are not always in the same place on every label. This is a section on labels for agricultural products that require compliance with the Worker Protection Standard. The Worker Protection Standard, or WPS, is a federal law that has specific requirements for training, notification, emergency assistance, and protective equipment for agricultural employees. Pesticide products that are labeled for agricultural applications are required to have an agricultural use requirement statement on the label directing users to comply with the worker protection standard. This agricultural use requirement section also lists restricted entry intervals. The restricted entry interval, or REI, is the time that must pass between an application and the re-entry of unprotected workers. Under the Federal Worker Protection Standard, no one can enter a treated field for the first 4 hours after the application. During the remainder of the REI, early entry workers who wear the required PPE can enter the field. Many labels used in non-agricultural disciplines do not list a restricted entry interval, so the rule of thumb is to restrict entry to unprotected people until after sprays have dried or dust have settled. The agricultural use statement is in a box on the label. It instructs the user to comply with all the requirements of the Worker Protection Standard, including training of employees, decontamination, application notification, emergency assistance, and minimum restricted entry intervals and personal protective equipment. Again, this section lists the REI and PPE requirements for early entry workers. Some product labels have both an agricultural use requirements box and another box titled the non-agricultural use requirements. This area of the label has special restrictions and safety precautions for the non-agricultural user. Make sure you're in compliance with this section if it applies to your application. All labels have a storage and disposal section. This section lists special concerns with storage. Some products become unusable if they overheat or freeze, so labels list storage temperature limits. Disposal language reminds the applicator that waste must be handled carefully and according to state regulations. The label also reminds applicators to triple rinse empty pesticide containers. The Directions for Use section of the pesticide label instructs the applicator on how to use the product. Generally, it includes information on the crops or sites where the pesticide can be applied, the target pest, product rates, how to mix and apply the product, potential phytotoxicity or other precautions, and how to manage drift when applying the product. The Directions for Use section of a label can be a very long and extensive section. It's important that you read the entire label to make sure you are applying the product in a correct manner. The pre-harvest interval, or PHI, is also found in the Directions for Use section for all pesticide products labeled for food or feed crops. The pre-harvest interval is the minimum number of days that must pass after the pesticide application and before harvest of the crop. This period of time allows the pesticide to break down to a level below the residue tolerance limit when the crop is harvested. EPA sets the pre-harvest interval. All pesticide users must read and follow the label to avoid misuse of the pesticide product. Misuse includes application of the pesticide to a host or site not listed on the label. When you apply at a rate higher than listed on the label, it's a misuse. Improper handling of the pesticide is also a misuse. Pesticide labels are legal documents and can only be used on sites that are specifically listed on the label. FIFRA does allow for specific deviations from labels. Legally, the host or site where the application is made must be listed on the label, but the target pest does not need to be listed. Pesticide labels allow the applicator to use any application method, even a method that's not specifically listed in the directions for use. There is one exception. To use chemigation, which is the application of a pesticide through an irrigation system, the label must state that chemigation is an allowable application method. Legally, pesticides can be applied at a rate lower than listed on the label, but never at a rate higher than listed on the label. Finally, it's legal to tank mix with other pesticides or fertilizers in a spray mixture, unless the label prohibits the mixture. It's recommended that prior to mixing pesticides in a spray tank, that a compatibility test be conducted. Mix relative amounts of pesticides in the proper mixing order in a jar. Observe the mixture for clumping, settling, smoke, or other incompatibility indicators. It's also a good idea to apply a small amount of the mixture to a host plant and examine the plant after a few days for phytotoxicity. Material Safety Data Sheets, or MSDSs, are provided by the manufacturer for all pesticide products, and they provide detailed safety information. Get them from your dealer. The product's MSDS details the composition, properties, hazards, and first aid procedures for the pesticide. They are written for people who manufacture pesticides but can provide useful safety, first aid, and other information. Federal and state worker right-to-know laws require that material safety data sheets be kept in a central location where all employees who might come into contact with the pesticides have access to them. The material safety data sheets include information about the pesticide's active and inert ingredients, physical, fire and explosion data, toxicology, and PPE. It provides greater detail when compared to the label. However, the label provides all the basic protections and information needed for handling the product. The pesticide applicator should become familiar with the information on the material safety data sheets. In summary, it's the applicator's responsibility to carefully follow all label directions. Read the label before buying, mixing, applying, storing, and disposing of pesticides. Be familiar with names, signal words, and symbols. Know the use instructions and precautions. Protect yourself beyond the label requirements. You are the responsible person to ensure the pesticide is handled safely and properly. Question 1. Which of the following is an allowable deviation from the label? 1. Applying at a greater application rate. 2. Applying at a greater dilution. 3. Tank mixing pesticide with a fertilizer. 4. Using chemigation even if it's not specified on the label. Choice A, 1 and 2 only. Choice B, 1 and 3 only. Choice C, 2 and 3 only. Choice D, 2 and 4 only. The answer is choice C, 2 and 3 only. You can always apply at a greater dilution, and unless the label prohibits tank mixing with fertilizer, that practice is acceptable. Question 2. Pesticides that have high acute toxicity and cause corrosive eye damage would display which of the following signal words? Choice A, danger, poison, peligro with a skull and crossbones symbol. Choice B, danger, peligro. Choice C, warning, aviso. Choice D, caution. Answer, choice B. This is very important. You must know the difference between danger and danger poison. Both are highly toxic, and a very low dose can cause harm. But danger means the harm is a very severe eye or skin damage, while danger poison means severe illness and potential death. Question 3. Which of the following are examples of precautionary statements, hazards to humans and domestic animals? 1. Fatal if swallowed. 2. Poisonous if inhaled. 3. Causes skin and eye irritation. 4. This product is highly toxic to bees. Choice A, 1 only. Choice B, 1 and 2 only. Choice C, 1, 2, and 3 only. Choice D, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Answer, choice C, 1, 2, and 3 only. All but D have potential harm to humans or domestic animals. D refers to an environmental hazard statement. This presentation was authored by Carrie Foss, Carol Ramsey, Becky Hines, and Brett Johnson of Washington State University Urban IPM and Pesticide Safety Education Program. The illustrations in this presentation were provided by the Nevada Department of Agriculture, the University of Missouri-Lincoln, Virginia Tech, the Washington Department of Agriculture, and Washington State University. Presentations were reviewed by Beth Long, University of Tennessee, Ed Crow, Maryland Department of Agriculture, Jeannie Kasai, the U.S. EPA, and Susan Whitney King, University of Delaware. Narration was provided by Becky Hines, Washington State University Urban IPM and Pesticide Safety Education Program.